Thank you, Ashley. Good morning, everyone. This meeting of the board is a hybrid physical virtual meeting, and I would like to welcome those in the boardroom with me today. While keeping your microphone muted, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
At this time, I'll ask the secretary to the board to address a few technical and protocol items.
We have a quorum. The full board is present for this meeting. Chairman Hall and Board Member Smith. Please ensure that you have silenced any mobile devices you have with you. The virtual portion of this hybrid meeting is on Cisco WebEx. We have two OIT staff, Ben Rana and Victor Amaya, monitoring and managing the meeting. They will be locking this meeting and no new connections will be allowed. OIT will be advancing the slides, so you will hear presenters say, "Next slide." If you lose connectivity in this meeting, please contact Victor Amaya. Lastly, this meeting is being recorded. The video recording of the open portion of this meeting will be posted for public viewing for a limited period of time. Chairman Hall, that concludes the technical and protocol items. We're ready to continue when you are.
Secretary will now read an opening statement on the government in the Sunshine Act.
This is an open Farm Credit Administration board meeting under the Government in the Sunshine Act. If anyone raises a subject that may be discussed in closed session as permitted by the Government in the Sunshine Act, Chairman Hall will entertain a motion to close the meeting.
We will now review the published meeting agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as published?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt the agenda as published.
I second the motion. Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the matter? If not, the secretary will record the vote on the motion.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Hall?
Aye. Motion carries. Next, we will consider whether any portions of the meeting should be closed to the public.
The agenda does not include items that we should properly discuss in closed session. I move that the entire meeting remain open.
I second the motion. Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the matter? If not, the secretary will record the vote on the motion.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Hall?
Aye. Motion carries. Please turn to tab 1, and this is the approval of the minutes as presented behind tab 1.
I move to approve the minutes for the March 13th, 2025 regular board meeting as presented.
I second the motion. Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the matter? If not, the secretary will record the vote on the motion.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Hall?
Aye. Motion carries. If you will, please turn to tab 2. At this time, I will ask Skylar Ogletree of ODAE and Gina Malasky. I messed up the first name. How about that, Gina? Gina Malasky to present the quarterly report on economic conditions and system conditions and performance. This is an information item. Skylar.
Good morning, Chairman Hall, Board Member Smith. My name is Skylar Ogletree with the Office of Data Analytics and Economics. I'm here today with my colleague Gina Malasky from the Office of Examination to give this quarter's report on economic conditions and system condition and performance. Next slide, please. In today's topics for open session, first I'll be going through macroeconomic trends with a short discussion on tariffs, followed by a summary of major commodity markets and returns. After that, I'll focus on current real estate trends and some of our commodity segments exhibiting lower price conditions. Finally, I will discuss farm financials and the system's allowance levels. I will then pass it off to Gina to cover the system's condition and performance. Next slide, please. In this first slide, I show 4 key economic indicators and their trends since 2004. Real GDP in green, 10-year real interest rate in blue, unemployment in yellow, and finally year-over-year inflation represented by the black line. GDP growth continued to slow but is staying positive. Recent decreases in consumer spending and confidence could push GDP lower this year. In addition, net exports are anticipated to negatively impact GDP growth in Q1, which may normalize during the remainder of the year. Interest rates continued a stable trend, with little movement relative to the Fed's mandated economic measures of unemployment and inflation. Unemployment remains low, with a recent uptick and some forward-looking concerns stemming from consumer spending. Inflation trended lower towards the Fed's goal of 2%. Overall, the U.S. economy is in a strong position, sitting on a soft landing from the pandemic with some clouds on the horizon from consumer spending and confidence. Equity markets show increased volatility as well in response to the tariff concerns, which I think is a good indicator, among others, of growing concern about and uncertainty about the general economy. Next slide, please. The chart on the left here shows the 5-year trend of year-over-year inflation along with the major contribution categories. On the right, I've prepared a cumulative price change graph to show how food prices have changed over 5 years. Notice that both categories have advanced prices around 30% compared to 5 years ago. As discussed briefly in the December update, food at home inflation slowed, but the cumulative effect shows the strain that American families are feeling. Also note that food at home had slowed its advance for the last 2 years overall, but a recent increase is the result of increases in beef prices and eggs. Next slide, please. The tariff picture is changing rapidly, with a 90-day pause for most countries announced just yesterday. I can't tell you what impacts these tariffs are going to have immediately, but I can tell you it is creating uncertainty, the environment is. What I thought would also be useful information is to illustrate the landscape of ag trade with the major trading partners of the U.S. The top 3 exporters are shown on the left chart, along with the rest of the world. As you can see, the U.S. is now a net importer of ag goods when we were historically a net exporter of ag products. Green columns are imports and blue columns are exports. The difference between the two represents the balance we have with each country, or in aggregate the rest of the world. You can see how we have a net import balance with both Mexico and Canada, and a net export balance with China. Again, this is only for ag. On the right is a drill down of what commodities we're exporting to these 3 countries. Exported ag goods tend to have a greater effect on producer profitability, which is why we're focused on that side of the equation. Mexico exports are made up of corn, wheat, dairy, sugar, and poultry. Canada exports are more diversified with miscellaneous food products, veggies, fruits, and nuts. We still export a lot of soybeans to China, albeit less than a couple years ago. Next slide, please. In this slide, we show how the livestock sector and crop sectors are experiencing opposite market conditions. As discussed in December, lower grain prices are benefiting livestock producers in combination with livestock prices received, experiencing recent increases. However, on the grain side, break-even prices range from $4.60 to $4.66 for corn and $11 to $11.56 for soybeans. The chart on the left will resonate with Midwest crop producers as they saw strong returns in the 2022-23 timeframe compared to today's market conditions. Including cash rent, operating cash flow is likely negative or below break even for many producers. Cow-calf operators, on the other hand, appear to be in the best position in the livestock sector. In 2024, the Livestock Marketing Information Center calculated estimated average returns for a cow-calf producer in the Southern Plains region at $443 per cow. This is the second highest behind 2014's $534 per cow and up from 2023's $252 per cow. Feeders still benefit from lower feed costs, but higher feeder steer prices have shaved some of the profitability from this segment. Next slide, please. Another industry I'd like to discuss is tree nuts, and in particular almonds. This segment has seen a longer period of depressed prices, but is showing some early signs of improvement. Notice the chart on the left, which shows the bearing and non-bearing acres in California, and we see the bearing acres rate of growth is beginning to slow, and the non-bearing acres rate of growth is decreasing. Meaning, the supply side of this equation may be beginning to correct. There was a 54% reduction in non-bearing acres compared to 2020, and bearing acre growth decreased from 5% to less than 1% over the same time period. We also observe an indicated improvement in almond prices as shown on the chart on the right. Although the U.S. is the largest producer of this crop, we could see increased international competition from countries like Australia. Next slide, please. Naturally, with some stress indicated in tree nuts and cash grains, we analyze land value trends in both of these industries. The chart on the left shows data back to 2018 using CoreLogic information from Iowa, where lower quality ag parcels are continuing a downward trend that we discussed in December. Most notably, the early decrease we observed in low quality land in December is now spreading to the medium quality bucket. Iowa farmland tends to be a leading indicator in farmland value trends, which show an overall 6.9% decrease in prices from 12 months ago. Higher yield potential and lower variable costs for the best ground continue to insulate price declines in the highest quality ground. The chart on the right uses CoreLogic data as well to derive a weighted per acre value for parcels with almonds. Tree nut land values are highly sensitive to water availability, but we see some increased volatility in recent years, which may be due to reduced stickiness from investor-owned parcels. The trend follows suit with what we see in planted and bearing acres, a slowdown in development, which makes sense given current price trends. Next slide. This winter, farm returns had a significant shift in profitability outlook because of the American Relief Act. This brought in an anticipated $36 billion of assistance for ag producers who experienced stress over the past 2 years. As a result, USDA forecasts an increase in farm incomes in 2025, as indicated in the chart on the left. The solid blue line is the 2004 to 2023 average net cash farm income. On the right chart, we show a longer historical view of interest expense in the farm sector. The peak you see in the left middle of the right chart is the period of high Fed funds rates during the late 70s and early 80s. The green dashed line is the threshold the Farm Financial Standards Council considers strong at 5%, so anything below that would be considered strong. And the red dashed line is what they consider vulnerable at 10%. USDA forecasts this ratio to come down a bit in 2025, largely due to higher incomes, but remains right around that 5% threshold. Next slide. However, not all farms are the same. In this chart, we show how interest expense ratios can vary by ground quality. Notice where lower quality ground had a higher interest expense ratio during a period of stress in the last ag cycle. Therefore, we see some risk of these ratios increasing for lower quality ground if prices continue to remain low for the grain sector. We also showed the same thresholds in green, yellow, and red provided by the Farm Financial Standards Council. Next slide, please. As an FCA examiner and former credit specialist, the topic of farm financials is near and dear to me. Using USDA data, I compiled a trend analysis of farm financials and prepared the next few slides discussing macro trends in those financials. Granted, financials will vary widely in the portfolio depending on market conditions, but I think you'll enjoy this perspective, which attempts to shorten the bridge between the economic side of these presentations and the credit quality information that you'll receive from OE. The chart on the left shows the recent run-up in farm sector assets, driven by increasing land values. Debt levels remain relatively strong in the sector, with land appreciation far outpacing debt accumulation. Though it's not cash, the system can give producers financial flexibility with the additional equity to fight headwinds in commodity prices if needed. The chart on the right shows the trend of debt to equity and debt to assets, which also show a positive trend. However, the word of caution here is this does depend on stable land values, which we will continue to monitor closely. Next slide. Moving on from the solvency end of the balance sheet and farther up to the current portion, we observe an overall stable position in liquidity. Working capital increased in recent years, and the liquidity ratios for the sector are strong overall. In addition to real estate values, we saw balance sheets grow on the heels of the pandemic through increased accounts receivable and crop inventories, indicating growth and future earnings capacity. USDA forecasts those crop inventories to shrink this year and experience some growth in the livestock herds, and this is likely due to current price trends. Similar to the last ag cycle, the farm sector balance sheet is well positioned for increased uncertainty that we anticipate this year. Next slide, please. The system appears to be preparing for this uncertainty as well. In this chart, we see a recent trend of allowance levels starting to increase. Additions appear to be across the board by loan type segment, and we will continue to monitor how the system reacts and responds to the economic environment. Theoretically, the allowance may be more dynamic and responsive compared to history due to the move to CECL, but could also lag behind increased risk more than before. So this will be a key measure to follow as we navigate increased uncertainty in ag this year. In summary, farm financials are well positioned for the apparent uncertainty. The general economy is stable with key economic indicators in a tight range over the past several months. Multiple areas of risk appear to be increasing and forming clouds on the horizon. Stress in cash grains and nuts persist and should be watched closely. We observe the first real softening of land values in areas that tend to be leading indicators, and the system appears to be preparing for uncertainty as well. Next slide. This concludes my section of the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Skylar? Board Member Smith?
Yeah, Skylar, I'm really surprised that we haven't seen a little bit more downward trend in liquidity in the past year, and maybe it's just something that's going to happen with the lower commodity prices, because we've been hearing about stress all year, and generally you'll see decreasing. I don't pay much attention to debt to asset ratio, because that really is not, that's a long-term measure of staying in business, but year to year is that current ratio that lenders really pay attention to. And surprised it's stayed as high as it is. I suppose that's something you'll watch closely going into next year. If you start to see that liquidity decrease, we'll see probably a spike up in our production loans.
That's an excellent point, and these are aggregate numbers. And I think that what we'll see is within certain sectors, you're going to see a pretty wide variation of how healthy those liquidity ratios are.
The other question, I go back to tariffs. This last week in the news, we've heard a lot of news of China and the tariffs, and geez, I lost track of who did the last tariff and tit for tat and all that. But looking more towards the positive side, apparently 70 countries have come to the table in negotiation. I know Mexico, we appear to be aligned pretty closely with Mexico, which is good news for corn producers, because that's our number one corn export destination, and also our number one cash crop in the country. But and also heard about a free trade agreement possibly with the UK. But any other trade agreements you hear, I think the China thing, we might as well park that way back in the back seat for the time being. Any other news of any good free trade agreements coming out of those 70 countries?
Thank you for the question. I think you're spot on with what you said, but I don't have. I would hesitate to opine on what might be in the pipeline in terms of trade agreements at this point.
Well, understandable. It's a day-to-day thing. So.
Yeah.
Hour to hour.
Hour to hour. Yeah, that's right. No more questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Skylar, and you sort of mentioned where we are today, and part of it is how long low prices extend and just positioning for that. What are some of the metrics you look at to sort of prepare for Office of Examination, some of our analysis there on system preparedness for a longer term downtrend, particularly in grain prices?
Yeah, I think liquidity will continue to be something that we have to monitor closely. I think when we gain visibility to what price conditions are, what's going to happen this year with marketing plans that crop producers are going to have, I think what we have to do is continue to watch liquidity closely, because that will be the first signs of sort of dinks in the armor that we can continue to watch closely. Like Board Member Smith said, the debt levels and debt to equity, they're at good levels, but it's a it's a measure of long-term performance, but it does provide us some context about what kind of flexibility lenders might be able to give producers if we do see that longer period of sustained lower prices.
One of the things we talked about in the briefing earlier this week was you can look at averages, but you've got to sort of separate out by institution because of their portfolio being more susceptible. So anything there that you can tell us that we're sort of digging a little bit deeper into with some of your data?
Yeah, I can. We have access to more data sources that give us visibility into those kind of more minute and smaller levels of information, but we'd also like to see that information continually improve. And so if we can obtain better quality information, we can continue to watch these things at a system level, and that benefits everybody.
I appreciate it. And I appreciate all your work that you're doing in ODAE, try to get us sort of more granular information. I think that's going to help us long term. But thank you, Skylar.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Good morning, Chairman Hall and Board Member Smith. As Skylar mentioned, my name is Gina Chmielewski. I am out of the Sacramento field office, and today I'm providing an update on the system condition and performance as of December 31st, 2024. Overall, the system reported solid financial results for 2024. The system's portfolio continued to grow at a relatively strong pace. Earnings growth was solid, which in turn supported capital growth. And the system's loan portfolio continued to perform well. While credit risk measures did trend higher, overall portfolio credit quality remained favorable. On this slide here, if we were going to focus a little bit here on portfolio growth. As of December 31st, system assets totaled just over $544 billion, up 7.2% for 2024. System loans totaled $429 billion, up 7.7% for year over year. On the left, the chart does show both the yearly percentage growth as well as the volume gains in the system's loan portfolio over the past 10 years. As you can see, loan growth in 2024 remained moderately strong. It was up from 2023, but somewhat lower than recent years. On the right, the chart illustrates system loan growth in the major loan categories for the past 3 years. Collectively, these loans categories represented 95% of the system's portfolio. As the chart indicates, for 2024, portfolio gains were primarily concentrated in real estate mortgage lending, and that growth was mainly due to targeted marketing efforts by certain associations and refinancings by borrowers in response to Federal Reserve rate cuts. Production and intermediate term loan lending was up due to higher utilization of operating lines. Agribusiness lending was mainly focused on processing and marketing loans and loans to cooperatives. The growth in the rural infrastructure lending did slow in 2024 compared to the very high growth in previous 2 years. Much of the loan volume growth continued to be in the energy sector and related to infrastructure and enhancement, technology improvements, and renewable energy projects. Important factors influencing the loan demand include the build-out and deployment of AI-related technologies in rural areas, and to a certain extent, congressional funding initiatives such as the 2021 Inflation Reduction Act, promoting climate-positive infrastructure projects. Next slide, please. On this slide, we have some information regarding credit quality. Overall, the system's portfolio continued to perform well in 2024, although credit risk measures increased, loan quality remained favorable. As of December 31st, non-performing assets totaled $3.5 billion, up from $1.8 billion at year-end 2023. Non-performing assets as a percentage of loans outstanding and other property owned increased 0.81%, up from 0.45% a year ago. Non-accruals, which account for the largest component of non-performing assets, increased to $3.2 billion as compared to $1.6 billion a year ago. The increase in non-accruals was primarily related to credit quality deterioration, impacting a limited number of borrowers in particularly stressed industries such as poultry, horticulture, tree nuts, hogs, and various food processing related sectors. Overall, 52% of non-accrual loans were current in principal and interest, as compared to 53% at the year-end 2023 and compared to 64% at year-end 2022. Loan delinquencies, which represent accruing loans that are 30 days or more past due, were also slightly higher, increasing 2 basis points to 0.36% of total accruing loans. The chart on the right-hand side focuses on loans classified less than acceptable by major loan category. At a portfolio level, less than acceptable loans increased to 5.3% compared to 4.1% a year ago. As the chart indicates, the percentage of less than acceptable loans was up for all loan categories except rural infrastructure in 2024. Agribusiness loans had the highest level of less than acceptable loans at 8.2%. And this was because agribusiness loans were mainly associated with tree nuts and poultry and eggs, farm supplies, and marketing wholesalers. They're all sectors who have been dealing with things such as volatile demand, price weaknesses, difficulty balancing supply of demand, and elevated non-feed input costs. Next slide, please. On this slide is a snapshot of the diversification in the systems portfolio. The systems portfolio is well diversified across a broad range of agriculture sectors. And the chart on this slide provides a snapshot of the major commodity concentrations within the systems portfolio. At year-end 2024, the system's largest commodity concentrations continue to be in cash grains at over 14%, rural infrastructure lending at over 13%, and both food products and cattle were both over 9%. On the table on the right, you can see that the portfolio segments with the strongest loan growth were farm supply and marketing at almost 22%, capital up 10%, and food products up over 10%. It is important to note that although the combined portfolio for the system as a whole is well diversified, loan portfolios at individual institutions will vary considerably and maybe will be less diversified than the system's portfolio overall. Next slide, please. The Farm Credit System makes credit available in all 50 states and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. The map on this slide shows those states which hold at least 1% of the system's loan volume. As the map illustrates, system loan volume is geographically dispersed. The 5 states that hold the highest percentage of system loan volume are California, Texas, Illinois, Iowa, and Minnesota, with California being the only state holding more than 10% of the portfolio volume. Collectively, those 5 states account for 33% of the total portfolio. Next slide, please. Moving on into earnings. Overall, the system reported solid financial results, including increased earnings in 2024. On the left, the chart shows that system combined net income totaled $7.8 billion, up 4.7%, or $353 million from a year ago. Higher net interest income, partially offset by an increase in non-interest expenses, was the principal driver for that increase in net income year over year. Provisions for credit losses, which is that red line on the chart, totaled $569 million, down slightly from $614 million in 2023. On the right, there's 2 charts there. The top one, it represents average earning assets. For 2024, as a result of the continued growth in the system's loan portfolio, total average earning assets increased 6%, or $28.4 billion, and was the primary driver for the increase in net interest income. The chart below on the right, which focuses on net interest spread and net interest margin. As you can see, net interest spread continued to decline in 2024. It dropped 7 basis points to 1.86% compared to 2023. This was mainly due to higher debt costs and the impact of competitive market pressures on loan spreads. Net interest margin declined 2 basis points in 2024 to 2.41% as income earned on assets funded by non-interest sources, primarily capital, mostly offset the impact of the drop in net interest spread. Next slide, please. On this slide, we're focusing on system capital. Throughout 2024, the system continued to maintain sound capital levels, with strong earnings continuing to support capital growth. As of December 31st, system capital totaled $78.8 billion, up $5.5 billion or 7.5% year over year. The system's capital assets ratio increased slightly to 14.5% at year end, up from 14.4% a year ago. As noted on the slide, regulatory capital levels at all system banks and associations continue to be well above regulatory requirements. Next slide, please. This final slide on capital is looking at the capital quality and liquidity. On the left-hand side is a detailed look at the components of system capital as of year end. As you can see, system capital quality is sound, with retained earnings accounting for almost 78% of total capital. This is the capital component over which an institution has the greatest control over, and is most readily available for asset growth, capital distributions, or to absorb losses. The chart on the right-hand side shows the liquidity position for the 4 funding banks as of year-end 2024. As the chart illustrates, bank liquidity levels were well above the 90-day regulatory requirement at year-end, with days of liquidity coverage ranging from 152 to 197 days. Next slide, please. For an individual institution, composite FERS ratings represent an overall assessment of the safety and soundness of that institution. The chart on this slide provides a snapshot of the combined composite FERS ratings for all Farm Credit System banks and associations. Overall composite FERS ratings for 2024 continue to reflect the system's financial position. Collectively, over 96% of system banks and associations currently have a composite rating of a 1 or 2. There are 2 institutions that have a composite rating of 3 or lower, which was unchanged from year end. In total, less than 4% of the system assets are held by institutions rated 3 or lower. Next slide, please. So these are some of the risks that OE is monitoring. OE believes agriculture producers and system institutions will face a difficult operating environment in 2025. An uncertain growth outlook for both the United States and world economies will continue to market volatility and present considerable challenges for agriculture. Grain producers are facing significant margin compression, elevated production costs, and low prices, which in turn limit returns. Other commodity segments, such as tree nuts, poultry, and swine, remain under stress as these industries try to balance production levels while facing uncertain demand and higher non-feed production costs. Lower returns and elevated interest rates will also have important implications for farmland and collateral values. Finally, as the last bullet highlights, there are a number of other factors that could have a significant effect on agriculture producers. This more challenging environment for borrowers is likely to be reflected in system credit quality. Fortunately, system borrowers and institutions have sufficient liquidity and financial strength to weather volatility in their operating environment. This concludes my part of the presentation. Chairman Hall and Board Member Smith, I would like to thank you for your time and attention today. And this time we would like to open it for any questions you might have.
Board Member Smith.
Gina, let's go back to slide 28 on capital. Essentially, the last 3 years, the capital's been plateaued out in that 14.4, 14.5 area, and has kept pace with growth. I guess my question is looking ahead. I know the quality of capital is good. I don't know what the average day is, something like 180, 175, 180 days, almost double the statutory, the 90-day minimum. We're seeing in 2024 the first year of credit deterioration. In and by itself, not a big number, but I always say look at the trend. At what point does OE become concerned about capital levels? And I look back in 2015 through 2018, we had a significantly higher capital level. and at that time was a real stagnant time in farm income. Is there a trigger point or something that you watch in particular that makes you start to wonder about capital adequacy?
I'm sure. So the capital ratios on this slide are an aggregate of the system. For individual institutions, it can vary considerably from all ends of the spectrum of how much capital they have. So I don't know of a particular trigger point system-wide. I'd have to get back to you, but I can speak on at individual institutions, we do monitor the trends of capital. We consider that in every examination. We consider it for quarterly oversight as well. I think for this year, we're seeing some slowdown in growth, which is what asset growth has been impacting all these capital ratios. So that might be some impact going forward on that.
Okay, well, thank you. And again, the liquidity, it's just farm operation really is no different from the farm credit system. Liquidity, the ability to cover the short-term loss and coverage looks good. So that part's very positive. Thank you, Gina. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. I don't have any questions, Gina. Good job. Thank you for your presentation, both you and Skylar.
Thank you so much.
So if there are no other questions from the board, I'm going to ask you to turn to the adjournment tab. And if there's no further business to bring before the board, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I second the motion. Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, Secretary will call the roll.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Chairman Hall.
Aye. Motion passes. Meeting adjourned.